All right, we're back. First thing I want to get out is this center nut. I know there are some kits out there that you can buy whereby you, if you break this, you can fish it inside and do all kind of things with it. But my hope here is to use again something that I fabricated on my own, and I did test it on the IMS bearing loose on a workbench. So there it is. A couple $100 online, or about $4 in hardware. Two nuts, different size nuts. Obviously, this one threads directly onto the center stud of the IMS. The little intermediate piece here that I had to bridge the two different sizes is just simply a piece of half-inch iron pipe used for gas line. And then I bought a longer bolt than I would ever possibly need, and a second nut to tighten down on whatever it is I'm going to pull backwards against. So we'll start out by getting this middle nut loose, and then pull the plate off after taking these 3 bolts off, thus exposing the bearing and all its glory. So for this, do not have a set of metric box wrenches here at home, offset boxes, so we're going to hope that a 1/2 inch will do. We will hold this in place. Seemed to work out just fine. Probably could have sprayed that stud down a little bit prior to beginning, but I did not. I forgot. Seems like it'll work itself out just fine. As far as this nut goes that we're pulling off there, okay, that's going to be it for the big screwdriver. But now that it's fairly loose, I can get a smaller pay no attention to the cheap beat up screwdriver that I have. Just trying to get the nut off the center. And looks like we have successfully done so. You'll note there is no rubber O-ring on the inside of that. Some years have a rubber O-ring on them, some do not. This one, if it is original, does not. Now, one of the things you're using the Pelican Parts IMS bearing, I like to call it the good as new bearing, is that you have to reuse the cover plate. So some amount of care has to be taken in the removal of it. You can't just go crazy. Of course, it comes with a new gasket O-ring. I believe it's a triple seal on it, or a double seal, something fancy about it. You know, some reason to charge. Relatively, it's not an arm and a leg, but it is a very common bearing that is available out of just about anybody's bearing catalog. It's a 4706. We'll get to that when I get this one extracted, but Okay, so again, expectation is that some oil is going to leak. I did go through here with a little wire brush prior to filming and sprayed down a bunch of brake clean in the area. Got it kind of cleaned off, if you will. In hopes of not getting any contamination back into the housing. Everything I've seen online, it's best to rotate these a little bit counterclockwise, and then you're left with a little flange under there you might be able to pry with. So we're gonna try that. And there it goes. I don't know if you're able to see that or not, but it rotated ever so slightly. We will give her a little pry there. Pry there. Probably have to try out a couple different things before we find the perfect tool. Also, probably won't hurt to work it back and forth a little bit just to break the seal of it. That was some progress. Okay, and we just need a second pry bar / screwdriver. Get it out of there. Okay. That was fairly straightforward so far. Please somebody knock on wood for me. Not a whole lot has there we go. There's our housing. Going to be reused. This already has a triple seal on it. Don't really see anything that jumps out at me. Pink elephants or anything on there. Set that aside. And before we get too crazy and accidentally drop that piece down in there, we will thread this on. Oh boy. Well, we've run into our first opportunity, and that is this stud is not the same size as the IMS removed from the 99, so my tool, well, it will work in theory, will not work in practice on this one. So we're going to have to remake this part of the tool, which is a real bummer. We were making good progress. And I just jinxed myself not 5 minutes ago. Probably not even that long ago. Anyhow, take a closer look at the IMS bearing. You'll see there's a retainer clip in there that's going to have to come out. The seal is still intact. I know one of the problems on a lot of these is that the seal itself comes apart. There's a lot of schools of thought on whether or not not having the seal on there and allowing the oil flow through to allow oil to flow through the bearing is good for it. Whether or not the oil gets splashed out of the bearing through centrifugal force. I believe Pedro has a real nice video on that, or quite a few videos on that. Those in that school of thought wanting a secondary oil source to the bearing versus, you know, ceramic hybrid bearings, things of those natures that, you know, again, for the purposes of this is just a, well, how do we even call it? Just a hobby. If I put this engine together and it doesn't work, it's worth what I have in it, plus the parts that I've purchased for it. So I will not be out really anything financially, even if it cost a couple $100 to tear one of these apart and do this work. Hello again, YouTube, and welcome back. Sorry about the 6-day delay in getting back to filming the video, but life happens, as we all know. And I was able to get the special tool refabricated with the smaller diameter nut on the one end. Please, no comments on the welds. I'm not a professional welder. I'm not even a hobbyist welder. But the two pieces of metal stuck together, so I'll count that as successful. Where we left off was we were just about ready to extract the IMS bearing from the engine that we have up here on the stand. We did this by locking down both camshafts with homemade tool that seemed to work just fine. We used the Pelican Parts pins that I had purchased for locking, pin singular, for locking the crankshaft down. It does come in a kit. The second pin is used to hold the torque converter in place for the automatic transmission so that you can extract the bolts from it and separate it from the engine. So we're at the point now where we are ready to pull the bearing out of the IMS shaft. I thought it'd be a good opportunity to take a minute and just show you maybe a little better view than just an engine block of what the IMS shaft actually is and the function that it performs, and kind of give you a different visualization on where we're actually working to extract this bearing. Sorry. So with no further ado, we will turn on the light and set you up in the tripod, give you a couple minutes of explanation, and then we'll get to it. Here we go. Okay. Yep. Well, in doing the setup, I accidentally paused the video. Didn't lose any content because I actually heard it this time. So I'll leave you here and try to explain to you what it is we're doing. This is an IMS shaft out of a Porsche Boxster, a 1999 model. Actually did a video after the fact of extracting the IMS bearing, which rides right in here, from this when I first made the special tool that we're going to be using today. Did that successfully, quite to my surprise. So didn't have a camera rolling when I did it. Just did a little bit of filming after the fact, and it is up on the YouTube channel. It's a very crude video. I didn't even have a tripod handy, so it was just a matter of just me showing what the tool was, what the bearing looked like after it was extracted. But basically, the IMS shaft has a series of 3 gears on it. What it does is it takes a chain from the crankshaft to this front pulley to transfer the crankshaft rotation to both of the camshafts. This one going to the this one would go to the passenger side cylinder head. This one on the opposite side would drive the driver's side cylinder head via chain, and those two chains both have tensioners, as well as the crankshaft to IMS chain. And those would be the 3 tensioners that we pulled out in the last video to take the strain off of it, because without it, you would be supported on this end, but really nothing to hold this end still. So by taking the tension off of it, it allows it to remain a little bit more stable in the engine block. They do offer some set screws with the kit that go in, and I believe they actually catch on the webbing in between the holes. The problem I had with them is getting that to line up, and for the engine to remain at top dead center was a little bit of a challenge, so I went with the method that we're using today, which was to lock the camshafts and the crankshaft down and just hold everything relatively still and in place. But you can see in there the groove that the retainer that holds the bearing in rides in. This little groove right here, we'll be extracting that first and then pulling the bearing out in this direction. And then installation, as the textbooks say, is just reversal of removal. But I thought maybe I'd share this with you. I actually have my retainer zip tied on here so I don't lose it if I ever need to put it back together. Thoughts were that I was not going to purchase a bearing from any of the parts places that think that it's a Porsche IMS bearing, rather from you know, a Timken or something, just using the bearing number, and probably pick one up for maybe $15 instead of $189. I would need to redo the triple seal, which we'll go over later in the video. But you know, as long as the stud coming through the bearing's in good shape, which this being a 99, it was a double row bearing, and it was a much heftier stud. Again, numerous discussions online about you know, the 99s weren't the quote-unquote problem year because they had a heftier stud. Turning around here, and this is a stud that I'm referring to that comes through the back side of the bearing, and we're actually using that stud in the blank to push the bearing out by pulling on it out here. So without further ado or further comment, we'll get you situated here. Hopefully get you... I'm going to need a new phone before this is over. Get you a good view. There is probably not going to be any such thing as a good view while I'm digging around in there with my snap ring pliers, but we'll do our best. So we just insert your pliers and hope for the best. Strike 2, strike 3. Getting a grip on the snap ring, so we're going to try to be a little more gentle here. Well, that was about as gentle as I could be, and it still moved. Got it. That would be your snap ring. Seemed to come out okay. Again, probably if you're following along at home, you may want to use the snap ring pliers that are a little more straight on. Because I've never done one of these in the engine, I don't know what all that's doing by moving the shaft back and forth. I'm sure it's not the best thing for it, but I think we're done with that part right now, although we are going to have to push in on it to install the replacement bearing. We'll see how that goes when we get to that point. So anyway, here we are with the my homemade bearing extractor. And one thing that I think that is important is that you grab as much thread as you can of this center support. And to do that, you're going to have to use a screwdriver to hold the support still while threading the 8mm by 1.0 pitch. It's just essentially a nut that's on there that I welded onto a 1/2-inch piece of iron gas pipe. Turns out that the 2-inch electrical conduit also corresponds quite nicely with the size of the outer diameter of the shaft. Again, I'll try to give you a view of this, but it just about perfect. It's not going to interfere with the bearing when it starts coming out of the hole. Just almost like it was made for it. So we're going to use that as our tool sleeve. I don't know if that's the proper name for it, but that's the name I'm using. And then we have, in the other video, I actually used a, what do you call it, a ball joint press receiver for doing this instead of the conduit, just because I was at the shop and had one. Thought it might be good to use. So, in keeping with the trying to keep it all a homemade theme with parts that you typically find in a home environment, we'll be using a piece of the steel that I made the camshaft hold downs out of, with the proper hole drilled into it, with the proper sleeve. Again, like in the other video that I showed you, I happen to have this thrust bearing on the shelf for a trailer jack, and it works quite nicely for when you're doing lug nut installs and such. Boy, that thing really wants to push in there. So what we'll do is we'll grab as much thread as we can with this end of the tool, so it's at least completely through the nut. You put the shaft on, and you obviously don't need to use this many shims and washers, but I did, so be it. Tighten this nut down. The one thing about using conduit, you want to be careful in that it's very difficult to get a perfectly straight cut on it, especially if you're using garage tools like a hacksaw, reciprocating saw, or whatnot, whatever you have laying around. Mine's not perfectly straight, but hopefully it's going to be straight enough for this demonstration. We're about to find out, because we're ready to go. So we get it on the shaft there, as you can see, and then we just begin to tighten the nut down on it. And the bearing gave loose there. That's to be expected. And the rest of it's all going to be extraction. Soon the bearing will clear the end of the IMS shaft and we'll have it for inspection. And we'll go over the part number that we see on it. Alright, so got the tool reinstated. Okay, and we're back. We've turned up the hokiness factor a little bit here, in that I had a previous sleeve that was cut what I believed to be too short, and I was correct in that belief. So I cut a longer one to use in the video. Unfortunately, it also was too short. Now I have stacked both of them to give me a little bit more area in the receiver cup to not interfere with the tool extracting. Try to keep these lined up. I know they're probably not going to stay lined up, but again, the bearing is halfway out, so there's very little pressure being exerted, and stacking these tools like this is probably not as hokey as it would be if you had to do it to break it loose. And there we go. We have one IMS bearing extracted for the cost of about $4.50 in pieces parts. Try to get this threaded off of the tool. Again, you have reasonable expectation that some oil is going to flow out of the shaft as it remained in there, even when you drain your oil out. And what we have here is a single row bearing, the problem bearing, if you will, that Porsche has designed into this. It is a NSK bearing, part number 6. It looks like a 6. Please forgive my old eyes that can't read that well. Can't see that well. I can read just fine. I just can't see what I'm reading. Looks like a 6204 DU 17. Made in good old England. Maybe it's their... no, I won't say that. Anyhow, this bearing you see here can be purchased from any retail establishment that sells NSK bearings. It can be ordered off of that part number alone, and you will get the exact same bearing from the exact same production line as what I have in my hand here. And it will not be a $187 bearing. Some of you may ask why I didn't just do that. The reason being is, in my opinion, one of the things that I see that go wrong with these particular bearings, I'll grab a pointer here, is when these studs fail. You notice how thin this is right in this area. I got to imagine that's the point of failure for these bearings. And with the new bearing, I also got a new blank for the back of it that has a 10 millimeter stud as opposed to an 8 millimeter stud. A little heftier, a little more, can withstand a little bit more. So now that I've done that, I can use that piece in 30,000 miles, if this car even makes 30,000 miles, when I come back to do this again, and I can do this replacement for a lot less money. Now, I know that's going to light up the forums and the internet about how wrong I am, and I probably am, but it's the way I'm doing it. I applaud you if you're doing it with all Porsche parts and with Porsche tools. Good for you. That's great that you're able to do so. You should feel secure in the knowledge that you're doing it the exact proper way that the factory would like to see it done, but it's just not the way that I'm doing it, not for this project, and not for a $1,500 Boxster. I want to tinker around with it, and I don't want to spend tens of thousands of dollars just for tinkering. So that's what I'm going to do. Anyhow, I'm gonna stop the video here so that I'm not continually putting up 20-minute long videos. The next video, we will be installing this new IMS bearing from Pelican Parts. It's probably one of the better ones out there for my purposes. And I'll show you what I'm talking about as far as the difference in the studs go. That is going to be your difference. A lot more meat on the Pelican Parts stud. It actually is a 6204V NSK bearing. Vent and seal probably is what the V stands for, whereas this stock one, the U, I believe, designated the double seal, and I'm not really even sure what the 17 designates. Maybe a specialty application, maybe not. I just don't know. This NSK bearing from Pelican is made in Japan, whereas, like I said, this one is made in England. And when they say it's a direct replacement, it is the exact same bearing. So your expectations of bearing life should be exactly that of when this vehicle was new. I have no doubt in this bearing's ability to make it 30,000 miles to the next bearing change interval. There was absolutely nothing wrong with this bearing. Really did it because the stud was small, and for the experience and for the ability to share anything that I learned along the way with somebody else that may be trying this. So with that, I'll pause the video and be back with the next one where we install the Pelican bearing into the IMS shaft. And again, I thank you for watching. I think this is going to be my 4th or 5th video in the series. Sorry I've talked so much in so many of them, but a lot of times the talking that I'm doing is not only to the audience that has taken their time to watch this, but to myself in talking myself through the steps that I need to take, because I'm by no means a pro or an expert at Porsche vehicles. Don't claim to be. I'm going to learn some stuff along the way. I'm sure if you subscribe and continue to watch my videos, you'll get a couple of them where you see me make some mistakes as well, and that's okay too. We're all here to learn. If I got to learn by making some mistakes publicly, so be it. I doubt there's too much that can be said that's going to really bother me, because I'm not doing this because I think that I'm the greatest Porsche technician in the world. I'm doing this just to share, and hopefully you get something from it. Anyway, with that, we'll be back in the next video. Thank you for watching.